Hello, everyone. Over the past decade, the mere mention of Chicago instantly brings to mind iconic names and images like Chief Keef, Lil Durk, 63rd Street, GDs, BDs, Zack TV, King Von, G Herbo, or Polo G. Yes, the name Chicago has now become synonymous with drill music and a chaotic, seemingly inescapable lifestyle. But behind all of that lies another layer of stories, ones that many people have yet to uncover. In reality, Chicago is a city of mysteries, diversity, and rich history. It boasts luxurious neighborhoods, peaceful middle-class areas, and of course, poverty-stricken, danger-filled districts. But more importantly, Chicago is not just a city shrouded in darkness. It also houses some of the wealthiest and most expensive zip codes in the U.S., mainly concentrated in its downtown and northern areas. In stark contrast, the southern and western neighborhoods present an entirely different picture, one that has persisted for decades. Today we'll dive into a story about a gang that many may not have heard of, but whose influence surpasses that of the mafia, the GDs or the BDs combined. This is the story of the Latin Kings, a gang that turned Chicago into its own kingdom. But before we delve into the dark secrets, let's first rewind and revisit history. To truly understand this tale, we need to travel back to the early 20th century. Starting in the 1920s, a wave of Latinx migrants from Texas began arriving in Chicago, primarily seeking work in steel mills and settling in the neighborhoods near these industrial sites. The city's south side, where the packing house industry thrived, became a hub for the Latinx community. Meanwhile, railroad workers found their home on the west side. Over time, the Latinx community expanded across Chicago. However, this growth slowed as states like California and Texas offered better job opportunities. Economic instability and harsh weather conditions also discouraged further migration for a period. Things changed in the 1950s when a new wave of Latinx migrants returned, but this time they were not from Texas or California, they came from Puerto Rico. From 1950 onwards, tens of thousands of Puerto Ricans began migrating to Chicago, with many settling in Humboldt Park. Within just a few years, the area transformed into a predominantly Puerto Rican community. Division Street quickly became the heart of this community, lined with Puerto Rican-owned restaurants, grocery stores, and countless businesses. However, lurking in the shadows, an underworld began to take shape. This leads us to the year 1954, the starting point of our story, with a man named Ramon Santos, better known as Papa King. Papa King wasn't an ordinary man. He was ambitious, harboring grand dreams of building a powerful empire where he could control everything: money, power, and respect. With this vision in mind, he founded a gang in 1954 called the Latin Kings. But the name wasn't chosen randomly. To Papa King, it carried a profound meaning, reflecting the structure of the gang he envisioned: a monarchy with the king at the top, ruling over princes and countless soldiers. Each tier had its own responsibilities, and every member was bound to an unshakable, strict order. This was the foundation of what would become one of the most notorious gangs in American history. Papa King didn't merely aim to create a gang, he sought to build a covert and highly influential empire that would dominate the city. To this day, information about the Latin Kings remains scarce, and few truly understand the scope of their operations. Even historians debate Papa King's origins. Was he truly a resident of 18th Street or the south side of the city? Rather than simply recruiting members, Papa King established a rigorous initiation system with 3 distinct phases, each a brutal and bloody test of loyalty and resilience. Phase 1, the novice. The first stage, known as the novice, required recruits to perform grueling, high-risk tasks. But surprisingly, joining the Latin Kings demanded more than just courage. It also came with a unique requirement: a high school diploma. Rumor has it that Papa King didn't impose this condition because he cared about education. Instead, he wanted to weed out the weak-willed, those who lacked perseverance and easily gave up in the face of adversity. A diploma symbolized commitment and seriousness, proving that the individual had the discipline to overcome challenges. Papa King believed that high school graduation was a turning point. Many potential recruits might choose to abandon the gang life in favor of a stable job or other aspirations. But for those who crossed this threshold, there would be no turning back. Phase 2, the mummy. Once a recruit completed the novice phase, they faced two choices in the second phase, the mummy. This stage allowed members to withdraw from the gang honorably, provided they fulfilled specific conditions. They had to prove they had secured steady employment and started a family. Only then could they leave with respect, having served their duties without betraying the organization. Phase 3, the new king. For those who chose to stay, the third phase awaited, the new king. This was the most critical and defining moment, marking the beginning of lifelong loyalty to the Latin kings. At this stage, members became full-fledged kings in the gang's underworld, dedicating their entire existence to the Latin kings. They lived, breathed, and operated according to the king's spirit, adhering to a strict code. Any violation resulted in severe punishment, including the infamous 3-minute discipline, an internal penalty that was brutal, unrelenting, and far from a joke. Betrayal in any form was utterly unforgivable. In a city as chaotic and crime-ridden as Chicago, the Latin kings evolved into a massive underground empire. They didn't just rule the streets, they posed a serious threat to even the most powerful rival forces. One of the most critical aspects of the Latin kings was their signature colors, black and gold. These weren't just arbitrary choices, they carried profound meaning tied to the gang's identity. Black symbolized darkness, crime, secrecy, and the hidden nature of their operations. It represented the shadowy life the gang embraced. In contrast, gold stood for light, prosperity, strength, and the power they sought to achieve. It was a symbol of the ultimate goals they aspired to, wealth and dominance over the city. However, as the Latin kings expanded their power, a formidable threat began to rise. A new rival emerged ready to challenge their dominance and potentially overthrow their reign. This looming confrontation would shape the future of Chicago's underworld, leaving its streets gripped by tension and uncertainty. The rise of Ambrose and the blood-soaked streets of Chicago. In the 1960s, within Chicago's West Side neighborhood of Pilsen, a group of Mexicans gave birth to a gang that would rise to prominence, the Ambrose Gang. Rapidly growing in strength and influence, Ambrose quickly became the primary rival to the Latin kings. During this time, a clear divide began forming among the city's street gangs. The Latin kings aligned themselves with the Black P Stones, while Ambrose joined forces with the Gangster Disciples, GDs. The rivalry between these factions tore Chicago apart, turning every corner into a battlefield. Bloodshed and violence became unavoidable as the city was fractured into warring territories. Yet much of the gang warfare's details remained shrouded in mystery, erased by the passage of time. This story took a dramatic turn in 1971 with an event that forever altered the Latin king's trajectory. At the center of this moment was a 16-year-old boy whose fate would become intertwined with the gang's rise to infamy. His name was Gustavo Colon, known by the nickname Gino. A rebellious teenager with a desperate need to prove himself, Gino found himself quickly drawn into the deadly orbit of gang life. On June 27, 1971, at approximately 1 p.m., Gino and a fellow gang member stood on the corner of Levitt Street in West Chicago. Their quiet observation was interrupted when they spotted a group of teenagers walking by. Among them was 14-year-old Nathaniel Burr, who caught the attention of Gino's senior. With a simple yet chilling command, the older gang member ordered Gino, "Go across the street and do what you have to do." Without hesitation, Gino crossed the street and approached Nathaniel. Within moments, a gunshot rang out. Bang! Nathaniel collapsed to the ground, his blood staining the pavement. Gino fled the scene, running home as if nothing had happened. That evening, the police arrived at Gino's doorstep. Witnesses had provided clear descriptions of both him and his accomplice. Within hours, Gino was arrested and thrust into the legal system. During Gino's trial, his attorney argued that Nathaniel Burr wasn't an innocent bystander, but a member of the rival Vice Lords gang. The court, however, dismissed this defense. In the end, Gino was sentenced to 27 years in prison. For many, such a long sentence would mean being forgotten by the gang, as loyalty in the underworld often depends on what a member can contribute in the moment. Yet, Gino's story didn't end there. In fact, it was only just beginning. Following Gino's imprisonment, the Latin kings faced turmoil not solely because of his absence, but due to a deeper issue: drugs. The gang's members, including their leader Ramon Santos, had succumbed to addiction, plunging the organization into chaos. The situation spiraled so far out of control that 7 key members drafted a manifesto exposing the gang's internal problems and demanding new rules to restore order. These changes led to an unprecedented outcome. Papa King was stripped of his power. Without a leader at the helm, the Latin Kings were thrown into a power vacuum. A fierce covert struggle erupted as candidates vied for the position of leadership. The new leader would need resilience, bravery, and the ability to command respect in a world defined by violence and crime. Astonishingly, the gang chose 17-year-old Gino as their leader, even though he was serving time in prison. Despite his confinement, Gino's influence was undeniable, and he quickly became the symbol of the gang's future. Under Gino's leadership, the Latin Kings didn't just survive, they became bolder and more aggressive than ever. From his prison cell, Gino orchestrated the gang's resurgence, cementing his legacy as a pivotal figure in the bloody history of Chicago's underworld. Driven by the ambition to make the Latin Kings the largest and most feared gang in America, Gino implemented a groundbreaking decision, removing the requirement that members be of Puerto Rican descent. This decision instantly widened the gang's reach, drawing in thousands of new recruits from diverse communities. Like any criminal organization, money was the lifeblood of the Latin Kings. They were involved in a wide range of illegal activities, including audacious heists targeting banks, jewelry stores, and any lucrative opportunity they could exploit. Meticulous planning and flawless execution often allowed them to pull off these robberies undetected. However, as their profits soared, they faced a pressing issue: the difficulty of using dirty money for significant transactions. To solve this problem, Gino and the Latin Kings began investing in legitimate businesses across Chicago. Their first venture was a small grocery store located at the corner of Rockwell and Hirsch. From there, they expanded to nightclubs, car washes, and restaurants, all operated by family members of the gang. These legitimate fronts not only laundered their illegal earnings, but also solidified their presence in the community. But as the flow of legitimate money increased, the Latin Kings set their sights on an even more ambitious goal. Petty robberies no longer satisfied their hunger for power and wealth. Their next target, a military weapons depot. With their headquarters situated directly across from an Illinois National Guard armory, the gang meticulously planned a daring operation over several years. Their target was the armory's weapons stockpile. On April 10th, 1978, the plan came to fruition. A gang member monitored the armory all day, waiting for the opportune moment. When a military vehicle left the depot, the Latin Kings sprang into action. As the vehicle turned a corner, gang members rushed out from a nearby house and surrounded it. The driver, realizing the danger, had no choice but to surrender. Like a well-oiled machine, the Latin Kings seized the vehicle and transported it to a hidden garage. This was the largest operation in the gang's history, a defining moment that solidified their power and limitless ambition. When the stolen military truck was opened inside the secret garage, the gang members were stunned. Inside was a trove of military-grade equipment worth over $100,000, a fortune in 1978 equivalent to over $400,000 today. The haul included advanced weapons and tools far exceeding their expectations. Disturbingly, the heist was never resolved, and the stolen weapons allegedly remained in circulation on Chicago's streets for years. A former member of the Latin Kings even claimed that some of this military-grade equipment can still be found in the city today. This wasn't a scene from an online game, it was the grim reality of Chicago. The Latin Kings not only ruled the streets, but extended their reach into the prison system, creating a chilling environment where even law enforcement struggled to maintain control. One of the most infamous prisons was Stateville Correctional Center in Joliet, Illinois, known as one of America's most dangerous and notorious facilities. Stateville housed the worst of the worst. It was a living hell, where even the prison guards feared for their lives. And among the many threats within its walls, the Latin Kings stood out as the most menacing force. In 1989, Lawrence Cush, a newly hired corrections officer, began working at Stateville. Known for his strict, no-nonsense approach, Cush quickly gained a reputation for being incorruptible and diligent. But his integrity made him an enemy of the Latin Kings. In an environment they controlled with an iron grip, someone like Cush posed a serious threat to their dominance. They couldn't allow such a principled figure to stand against them. What followed was a harrowing confrontation between a man determined to uphold the law and a gang willing to stop at nothing to maintain their power. Gino, the leader of the Latin Kings, decreed that Lawrence Kush must disappear, summoning a secret meeting with 3 of his most loyal members. He issued the chilling order: eliminate the prison guard. However, the 3 men hesitated upon hearing the command. They were willing to intimidate Kush, but not to carry out a violent attack. Sensing their wavering resolve, Gino stood, his gaze icy and commanding. With a voice devoid of mercy, he declared that disobedience would mark them as his enemies. Cornered and terrified, the 3 had no choice but to comply. On July 1st, 1989, during the prison yard recreation time, the 3 gang members surrounded Lawrence Kush. What began as intimidation escalated into a brutal attack. In a flurry of violence, Kush was left bloodied and motionless. The attack was swift, savage, and final. The aftermath was grim. All 3 perpetrators were sentenced to life in prison for the assault. But the story didn't end there. Consumed by guilt, the attackers began to reflect on their actions. They realized they had been mere pawns in Gino's ruthless game. Seeking redemption, they confessed the full truth to the authorities, hoping to bring an end to the Latin King's bloody reign. When investigators raided Gino's cell, they uncovered a damning piece of evidence: a list of prison guards with Lawrence Kush's name ominously marked with an X. Though the list strongly implicated Gino, it was not enough to convict him. Within the prison walls, Gino wielded power comparable to the warden. The harsh reality became clear. The Latin King's members were not warriors fighting for honor, but expendable pawns, discarded or destroyed if they dared defy orders. While Chicago remained their stronghold, the Latin King's influence soon reached New York City. In 1990, the gang began expanding into Sunset Park, Brooklyn, a lucrative territory for illicit profits, but a perilous battleground where a single mistake could mean death. New recruits in New York had no idea they were joining one of the most vicious gangs in America. Meanwhile, the leaders from Chicago were unprepared for the vastly different environment they would face. Unlike Chicago, where gang activities often went unchecked, New York City was heavily policed. The NYPD, armed with advanced surveillance and cybersecurity tools, monitored every call, transaction, and bank account tied to the gang. Between 1992 and 1994, Sunset Park became a graveyard for the Latin Kings. 7 members met violent ends in brutal internal purges. Initially, the leaders believed rival gangs were responsible, but NYPD investigations revealed the chilling truth. These were executions ordered by the Latin Kings themselves. The reasons for these murders were as petty as they were terrifying: failure to follow orders, incomplete tasks, or even voicing dissent. These events highlighted a horrifying reality. In the world of the Latin Kings, even the slightest betrayal was punishable by death. In 1994, the NYPD launched a massive RICO operation targeting the Latin Kings. The crackdown resulted in numerous arrests, with 33 members sentenced to life imprisonment. Court testimonies exposed the gang's horrific internal purges, where members were killed for as little as a single act of defiance. After serving 26 years in Stateville Prison, Gino Colon, the infamous leader of the Latin Kings, was granted early parole. He convinced the court of his reformation, citing a GED, completed college courses, and a stable job awaiting him on the outside. But just days before his scheduled release, a shocking revelation emerged, one that would change everything. On September 19th, 1997, Gino and his wife were arrested on 12 serious charges. What shocked everyone was the revelation that, even while incarcerated, Gino had been running a multi-million-dollar criminal empire based in Chicago. His wife acted as the operational head, managing a drug and weapons trafficking ring that generated an annual revenue of $6 million. From his prison cell, Gino issued orders through monitored phone calls which his wife relayed to the Latin Kings. But this intricate system ultimately became his downfall. Chicago police had been monitoring Gino's every call, exploiting his misplaced confidence in the laxity of the prison surveillance system. The truth unraveled, and both Gino and his wife were convicted. While his wife served her sentence and was released relatively quickly, Gino faced a much longer term behind bars. His arrest sent a strong message from Chicago law enforcement to the Latin Kings. We control this city. However, this apparent victory didn't mark the end of the Latin Kings. Though temporarily weakened, but the gang's power and influence endured, proving that such a deeply rooted criminal organization couldn't be easily dismantled. From 1997 onward, the Latin Kings not only survived, but expanded their reach. By the late 1990s, the gang operated in 41 states across the U.S. with an estimated 25,000 to 30,000 members. Though they suffered a significant defeat in New York, Gino and the remaining leaders demonstrated that criminal empires don't die. They adapt and evolve. The Latin Kings adopted more discreet and calculated strategies, moving away from the overt violence that had defined their early years. Their activities became shrouded in secrecy, but their power remained undeniable, extending beyond U.S. borders. From Ecuador to Mississippi, California to Spain, the Latin Kings transformed from a local street gang into a sophisticated global crime network, prioritizing profit over senseless confrontations. Beneath this facade of sophistication, Chicago remained a hot spot of tension. In May and June 2020, amidst nationwide protests, the Latin Kings seized the opportunity to assert their dominance. They mobilized to defend their territories, which stretched from Little Village to Humboldt Park and even into the city's southern neighborhoods. This decision plunged them into violent clashes with rival gangs like the GDs, BDs, and Folks. The resulting bloodshed exacerbated the already volatile state of a city long accustomed to violence. Despite the dark legacy of the Latin Kings, a beacon of hope emerged from the shadows of Chicago. A young rapper known as King Ace, a former Latin Kings member, began making waves in the hip-hop world. King Ace's journey from gang life to the music industry captured widespread attention. His talent and story of transformation inspired many, offering a rare glimpse of redemption in a world steeped in crime. Once known as a notorious figure in the gang, he now sought to carve out a new identity, using his platform to shed light on the possibility of change for others still trapped in the gang's shadow. The rise of King Ace raises questions. Is this a true turning point for the Latin Kings, or merely a fleeting story of defiance against a deeply entrenched system? Will the gang's influence continue to spread, or will this spark ignite a larger movement for change? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this. See you in the next video.